Llévate más de lo que esperas todos los días con el nuevo McValue en McDonald's. Ahora puedes comprar uno y sumarle otro por $1. Así que cuando tu equipo favorito enfrente a sus rivales, enfrenta tus antojos con $5 Meal Deals. Y si estás corriendo para alcanzar el desayuno, corre a la app para llevarte ofertas antes del cutoff. Tú decides, y con McValue, tu decisión siempre rinde más. Precios y participación pueden variar. BOGO $1 válido para un producto de igual o menor valor. Debe estar registrado en Rewards para ofertas en el app.
Uh-oh. The last cookie.
You can get a new box of cookies in as fast as an hour with Walmart Express Delivery.
Are you my guilty self-conscience?
No, I'm the voice offering you promo code EXPRESS for free delivery on your first order.
Hey, who ate my cookies?
You mean, these cookies?
Order now. Welcome to your Walmart. Promotion valid for first express delivery order. $50 minimum subject to availability. Restrictions apply.
The Tudors Dynasty Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Rebecca Larson, and I'm very excited today to welcome to the show for the very first time, Brigitte Barnard. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm excited to have you on the show because we're going to talk about something that I don't think I've ever really discussed on this show, and that's being a midwife in Tudor times. This is just, it's a great topic because, right, when it comes to Henry VIII and the six wives, all we ever talk about is their pregnancies, isn't it?
Yeah, there's so much to go into there. It's something I could talk about endlessly.
I love it. Well, we could talk about the Tudors forever, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, you've been a fan of the Tudors for a very long time, like most of us, haven't you?
Very long time. I started reading Jean Plady's books when I was a little girl, and I became obsessed with them at that point. And so I think by the time I was in third grade, I was just scouring the library for anything I could find about the Tudors. So yeah, it's been a while.
I love that. Jean Plady was my first fascination with the Tudors as well. So I think a lot of people started there.
She's great.
Yeah. And as far as midwife stuff, you have some experience in this, don't you?
I do. Yeah. I'm a home birth midwife.
I love this because
all my kids are at home. So,
oh my gosh. Well, I had a midwife when I had my daughter as well.
Oh, great.
Yeah. It was something that I remember at the time. I had just moved to Fargo. I was pregnant with my daughter. I didn't know anyone. I did, I had to decide which route I wanted to go. And a girlfriend of mine said, I really highly recommend getting a midwife. And I thought, oh, okay. And I did. And it was a wonderful experience. So I'm excited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good
I didn't do it at home, though. I wasn't that brave.
Well, I was only brave enough to do it because I'd seen so many already. I started out in hospitals. So I knew the difference between the situation at the hospital versus the situation at home. So I knew both sides of birth. So yeah, I was able to make a pretty educated choice there. I wasn't worried or afraid. So, and I had a good team of midwives. I didn't do much by myself. So that was good.
Okay. So the first question I think I have for you, and I hope you can answer this, is what's the difference now for midwife training versus in Tudor times? How did they train back then versus the training that you go through now?
So for a home birth midwife, the training is the same. It's through apprenticeship. So you get apprenticed to a midwife and you go around with her and she teaches you all the things that you need to learn. And in the state of Colorado, they have a licensing program through the state. And with the guidelines that you follow, then you get licensed through the state with their regulations. And it varies from state to state. But because I trained in Colorado, so that's how they do it there. And you just follow the midwife around and you learn all the things that you have to do. And you watch a lot of births. And that's kind of how they did it in Tudor times as well.
Yeah. So out of curiosity, when it comes to the Tudor court and the wives of Henry VIII, how did they come up with who to choose as a midwife?
I think it was probably word of mouth. They would hear probably from other ladies in the court, who they had used, who they liked, who they didn't like. So that's, probably how they learned who was a good midwife and who to avoid.
Yeah, they're like, she's good. Let's grab her.
Yeah, and it's the same. This is true today. Also, the comparison is very similar.
Yeah. So when we look at Catherine of Aragon, of course, Catherine of Aragon had a lot of pregnancies, as far as we know, during her time. Did she have the same midwife during them all? Do we know?
We don't know. We really no. I couldn't find anything in the records about who her midwife was or wasn't. So that's why I was able to write the books that I've been writing, because no one's recorded as her midwife. So I had a lot of free reign there to make up my own characters.
That makes it so much easier when you're writing a story like that.
Easier.
You mentioned research, and I'm curious, how do you research something like midwives? Where do you find information?
Well, there's quite a few books that have been written on the topic. I'm wondering if I have one here. Hang on. Okay, this is a really good one. It's by David Cressy. I know it's backwards for you guys. David Cressy. It's called Birth, Marriage, and Death in Tudor and Stuart England. Oh. So I used this book a lot, and I did a lot of research by other authors as well. So I did a lot of reading and checking facts and looking things up, and Google Scholar was really helpful. But the midwifery part, a lot of the midwifery part, because women give birth the same today as they did then. The mechanics are exactly the same. So I didn't have to look any of that up. I just used the knowledge that I had as far as what birth is like and the postpartum period and everything like that.
Yeah. I'm curious too, when it comes to pregnancy, right? We always talk about the Tudors and how they would not announce that they were pregnant until they felt a stirring in the womb, right?
Mm-hmm, the quickening.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. I couldn't remember the term for that.
Yeah. Quickening, which would occur between 15 and 20 weeks gestation.
Okay. So then we're looking at about 5 months, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty far in if you think about it.
Yeah, well, it would be quicker for mothers who were experienced, but for first-time mothers who wouldn't know what they're feeling or what to expect, that would take them longer. But if you've already been pregnant before, you kind of know what those little flutterings are, and so you're able to identify it quicker the second, third time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, as a mother myself, I'm going to ask you a strange question.
Go right ahead.
After I had my daughter, after you carry a child, you get used to the feeling, right, of having that child inside of you. Is there such a thing as like feeling phantom movements after you've already given birth, like even years later?
Hilton brings you new ways to stay, with experiences that let you capture the glory days. Introducing the Graduate Hotels. Each inspired by local college towns, these stays are always original and never boring. Get in touch with traditions all across the country and enjoy a stay that's a class above the rest. Book at Graduate Hotels with Hilton Honors Points at Hilton.com. It's a win-win. Hilton, for the stay.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Well, I've experienced that. I've had 4 children, and I've experienced that. So I've never heard it talked about in the literature, but I've definitely felt it. It could just be gas. I don't know. I'm not sure. It could be like a muscle spasm of some kind. But you feel those little flutterings, and when you feel it again, you go, oh, I remember what that was. And it's like the baby, but it's not, because you're not pregnant. So what could it be? I don't know, really.
Yeah, exactly. Well, at least I know I'm not alone there. I always thought it was a little bit odd, but I love that you say it could be gas because that's what I would always tell myself. Like it's nothing. It's probably just gas.
Yeah. Right.
Okay, so the woman, she has the quickening. At this
Mm-hmm.
point, she may have already had some type of cravings, I would assume. And I don't know what it was like for you, but when I was pregnant, before I even found out that I was pregnant, it was like the classic craving pickles.
Uh-huh.
I
Right.
never had like pickle cravings before in my entire life. And I remember going into the fridge one day and just eating like one baby dill after another and going, oh my gosh, these pickles are so good.
Yeah.
Not even connecting that.
Right, right. Well, it makes sense that you would crave salty things when you're pregnant because your blood volume is doubling and you need that salt to create blood.
Okay, that makes sense then.
Every woman craves salt when she's pregnant. It's really normal.
Oh, interesting. I honestly didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we know Anne Boleyn craved apples, right?
Right. I mean, the Tudors put a lot of stock in cravings, you know. Oh, she's craving quail. She must be pregnant. Or she's craving apples. Oh, midwife, you know.
Well, yeah, science has come a long way since then, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so the woman, let's say we're now at the quickening stage. We're at about 5 months. At what point do they decide to put the woman, wow, my brain, is it Monday right now? I feel like my brain is not working. So she goes into seclusion. What's the word I'm looking for?
Into confinement.
Thank you. Wow, you were just finishing all of my sentences for me today. So the woman goes into confinement at what point of her pregnancy?
At about 30 weeks gestation.
Okay, so she's got about 10 more weeks to go.
Yeah, approximately.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how would they determine back then?
They didn't have any definitive means of determining the due date. It was very vague. It would have to be within the month. So they would say you're supposed to go into confinement at 30 weeks gestation. And so they would have to guess when that was. They didn't have any way to know for sure. So the woman may have been in confinement for quite a few weeks or only a few days. It really varied quite a lot.
Wow. Yeah, that's a big difference.
Also, if the baby's overdue or if the baby's premature, all of those things you have to take into account as well.
Right. Well, nowadays they can really determine those things with ultrasounds and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely.
How would they? Sorry,
Yeah.
how would they have determined in Tudor times if the baby was too large or if their due date should be moved up? Did they have any way of being able to feel around?
So what a midwife does, and it's true today as then, is you feel the uterus. You find the top of the uterus. And then you measure it. And if it measures 20 centimeters, then you're 20 weeks pregnant. If it's 40 centimeters, then you're 40 weeks pregnant. It goes 1 centimeter per week. And it's very, very accurate, actually. I don't know if they had marked off centimeters on tape measures or what they used, but I'm sure the midwives had something that they used that had like some kind of measurements, like on a ribbon or on a piece of cloth. I'm sure that they did. And they could tell with pretty good accuracy how far along a mother was. When the uterus is up to the navel, that is 20 weeks gestation. And so, yeah.
Oh, interesting. I love this. I love that we're talking. This is honestly a topic I've wanted to discuss for such a long time, and I just never knew who would be the right guest for it. So I'm so excited.
So fun.
Okay, so the woman goes into confinement at 30 weeks, let's say, and who goes in with her at that time?
So who goes in with her is some of the ladies of the court that she would want to have around her. If she had any sisters, her mother, cousins, relatives, female relatives. And as long as she was not in labor, she could have girls with her. But once she started labor or active labor, then the young women who hadn't been married yet would get kicked out.
Okay. Okay. And from the moment that the woman would go into seclusion, I keep doing seclusion. Confinement.
It's okay. You can say, that's fine too.
Okay. From the moment she went into confinement, did they immediately pull the curtains, make everything warm, or
no, that was beforehand?
It was.
Yeah, the room was prepared well before she would enter it. Oh. And Margaret Beaufort was the one who started the codification of the confinement procedure. And she had it down to the number of cushions in the room, the colors of the cushions, how the tester bed was draped and what kind of fabric. And the woman would also have a pallet on the floor. That's where she would actually give birth, on the pallet on the floor or on the birthing stool. But she wouldn't enter the state bed, the really fancy bed. She wouldn't enter that until after the baby was already born.
So what we see in TV shows and film is not right.
No, no, definitely not.
That makes sense. Well, you mentioned Margaret Beaufort, and now we have to talk about her and her pregnancy at such an early age. We know that changed so much when it came to...
I'm writing a book right now for Pen and Sword. So I'm writing a book on the mothers and midwives of the Tudor dynasty, and I'm talking quite a lot about Margaret Beaufort right now, and I've done a lot of research into it. So yeah, ask away.
Yeah, I'm so curious. She was so young. She must have had a delicate frame.
She was 13 and 8 months when she gave birth to Henry.
Yeah, I mean, that's young. And to think...
But a lot of historians have jumped to the conclusion that it was a traumatic birth because she was so young. In my experience, teenage girls give birth so easily and much more easily than older women. And you would think that 13 and 8 months is cause for a lot of concern, but it's the concern would be for puerperal fever, which would happen, when an infection would set into the uterus after birth. And that occurs, it doesn't matter what your age is, if you're 15 or if you're 50, the odds are that if you get that, you're going to die. But it's not true that because she was so young that the birth had to have been extremely traumatic for her. There's nothing in the records that says that. In fact, everything in the records that comes directly out of Margaret Beaufort's pen or her mouth, that's been recorded by other people, says that the birth was, well, she doesn't talk about the birth directly, but that she loved, having her son, and her son was so incredibly important to her. And she celebrated the day that she gave birth to him. And there was never any indication that it was unusually traumatic. I think historians have said that so many times, and they're repeating each other, but without any source. There's no source saying that. I can't find anything at all. There's no original source that said it was difficult.
It happens all too often where the same thing just gets repeated over and over because nobody else has dug deep into it.
Right. And the secondary infertility, we don't know what the cause of that was. It could have been, my theory is that she was really, really traumatized by having to engage in sexual intercourse at the age of 12 with a man who was in his 30s. And I don't think that he had much of a bedside manner. And I think that she was really, really traumatized by that. And probably that's more likely the cause than any trauma sustained during the actual birth.
Okay.
As a midwife, that just does not make sense to me at all. I'm like, well, where's the evidence for that? And what damage where? Like to her uterus? Was it scar tissue? It wouldn't be. So it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. So as a midwife, then let's talk about that a little bit. Like, what would it take? Like, what could happen during the birthing process that would cause a woman not to be able to have any more children?
That's a good question. I can't, I mean, a normal natural vaginal birth, there shouldn't be any reason why you couldn't go on to have children afterward. It could be that if you had some kind of endometriosis or some kind of infertility that, was like possibly, we know that insulin resistance causes infertility. They didn't understand what kind of hormones were involved with getting pregnant back then, but we do know that does play a part. So, it may just have been something that had to do with her husbands. Maybe they weren't fertile men. I don't know. Maybe she couldn't have sex after what happened to her when she was 12. It could be that she was too traumatized. I know that she goes on to become a nun, and she forgoes all physical relationships with men. And she makes a comment about her granddaughter, Margaret, going off to Scotland before she's 14. She's like, don't do it. It's bad. She'll get traumatized. The husband could hurt her. Well, I think that that's, coming from her own experience. And I think that she was extremely traumatized by having sex at such a young age. And in my mind, that's the reason why she didn't have more children.
Yeah, it seems logical when you put it that way.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, poor Margaret. She really had a tough life.
She did.
Oh,
really did. Although she had a pretty good life. And, after her son got put on the throne, I think she was pretty happy with her life after that. She threw some good parties, actually.
I feel like I don't know enough about her. I read Nicola Tallis's book on her, The Uncrowned Queen, quite a few years ago, and I think that's the last. But she was a fascinating woman.
She was.
What a mother to have. The king's mother, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm curious, you mentioned endometriosis, and I feel like that is still to this day one of the things that we don't quite understand. If you're not going through it, if you haven't experienced it. So during the time of the Tudors, or in history in general, did they understand endometriosis?
No. They did not.
I think of like Mary the First, when she was young, we always hear about her having terrible cramps and all those things.
Yeah, she could have suffered from endometriosis. I think she probably did. From.
Yeah, I feel her story is the saddest of all of them, isn't it?
It is. It's really sad. She has such a bad rap that she doesn't deserve, I feel.
No, but I do feel like there are a bunch of historians and scholars out there now who are finally getting the truth out.
Yeah.
And one of the guests that I have on the show quite often, Dr. Peter Steffel, has talked about how he does believe she was actually pregnant at one point and miscarried. Have you researched any of that?
So I have researched that. So I'll just backtrack really quick and talk about my book. Yeah. It's called The Tudor Queen's Midwife. And the first, it's a trilogy. So the first book is all about Catherine of Aragon and all of her miscarriages and stillbirths and all the crazy things that happened to her. The second book is about Anne Boleyn and Jane Seymour. And then the third book actually is about Mary the First and Elizabeth. So, so I just wanted to go back and let people know I'm an author. Yeah. You can buy my book on Amazon.
We'll talk about that more at the end too. I want to make sure that people know where to find you and all of that too.
Yeah.
So Mary the First and her pregnancy, or even her phantom pregnancies, but I am very intrigued by the idea that she was actually pregnant.
I know. I am too. And so I've been reading everything I can lay my hands on, and I can't find anything that corroborates an actual pregnancy. It does seem to be that they were psychosomatic pregnancies. I can't find anything, and I have really, really searched high and low. I can't find anything that suggest she actually ever was really pregnant. I'm sorry. I wish that she were. I wish I had other things to tell you that unique things to tell you that are new and interesting. But I don't really have anything new and interesting to say about that, because everything that I've read so far has led me to the conclusion that she never was pregnant.
Are phantom pregnancies as common now as they seem to have been then?
No, they weren't common then either. They're rare. They're extremely rare. Yeah. I've never seen one. I don't know any midwife who's ever seen one. And I think that they're just really few and far between.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Such a sad thing. We can say it over and over, right? We just feel for Mary the First. She desperately wanted.
We feel for her. It's totally tragic.
Yeah, the poor, all she wanted, right, was an heir, just like her dad.
All she wanted, and she would have been such a good mother.
Yeah, she would have.
Yeah.
Well, her stepmother, Catherine Parr, is somebody that I've looked into quite a bit because I've been researching Thomas Seymour for so many years. And in that research, I've always been intrigued, and I'm glad that I have you here today, because I want to understand, at the time of birth, what did the room look like? Was there a male doctor in there at that time?
No. Mm-mm. No. First of all, there really weren't male physicians in the Tudor times that cared for pregnant women. They may have seen them early on a few times, during their gestation, but they were attended by midwives. Jane Seymour, at the end of her birth, while she was in confinement, the midwives were kicked out, and then physicians were brought in to mess things up. And that did not go well for Jane.
No, it definitely didn't. Well, and it seems like with Catherine Parr, one of the statements that was made after her death by one of her ladies, I was going to say it wasn't by her, it was one of her ladies, was that Catherine had said something to Thomas Seymour that if I had been allowed to have the doctor come see me afterward, that maybe this wouldn't have happened.
Unfortunately, it would have happened, because she did die of what they call childbed fever, and that she would have died no matter who attended her, because there was nothing they could do to stop it, because the only thing that can stop it is antibiotics. So
yeah,
she was doomed. All women who had that condition were doomed to die. There was nothing for it.
It's so tragic. And in another interview that you did, I think you had mentioned that there were two midwives, one for the mother and one for the child.
Yes. Yeah. At least two midwives, sometimes three.
See, I had never heard that before. Can you explain what their duties would have been?
Okay, so in a normal situation, you would have had one midwife who would be supporting the mother, and then another midwife who would be catching the baby. And then she would take the baby, she would tie the umbilical cord and then cut it. They had a special knife that they used for cutting the umbilical cord. And then she would carry the infant off and clean the infant and examine the infant and swaddle the baby. And then the other midwife would attend to the mother. She would deliver the placenta, and she would make sure that everything was okay. She wasn't, bleeding an excessive amount or anything like that.
Okay. So it took a team.
It took a team, and it still does. That's still the way it's done today.
Yeah. Yeah. There's always several people in the room, isn't there?
Yeah. Well, with the home birth situation, it's generally just the two midwives, one for the baby.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Jane Seymour, who of course is like the most.
Oh, poor Jane. Oh my God.
We always talk about her dying from puerperal fever.
That she did.
What do you think?
I think she had an embolism.
Really?
Yeah.
Tell me more about that. Why do you think that?
Because there were no symptoms of fever, and there were no symptoms of anything that would lead me to believe she had an infection. They didn't describe pain. They didn't describe that she was, when you have childbed fever, you have a fever. And that's why they called it that, because, I mean, you spike a fever immediately, that kind of an infection, your body is going to have a fever immediately to try to fight the infection, which it can't fight the infection in almost all cases. You die. And it just doesn't go along with the usual childbed fever symptoms. And she survived for 10 days.
Right.
You don't survive for 10 days with childbed fever.
I've always thought that was suspicious too. Like, she gave birth, but I think it was 12 days she lived. And
so you don't survive 12 days with childbed fever. And she didn't have a retained placenta, I can tell you that for sure, because that's a hemorrhage, and she would have bled out and died pretty quickly.
Okay. And Catherine Parr lived for 5 days after giving birth.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
3 to 5 days. You don't survive for very long with childbed fever. It's a when a big organ like that gets infected, it's a bad situation.
So Jane Seymour's birth seemed to be a rather long process. Do you think that had something to do with it?
No, probably not. I don't think so. The fact that she had such a long labor, I think, suggests that there was probably a malpresentation. Like the baby may have been what we call sunny side up, with the face up instead of down. Like usually the head is down like this, but if the face is up like this, it's a much more difficult birth. Or the baby could have been lying transverse in the womb, which is usually the mother dies if that's the case, and they can't get the baby out. It's an impossible situation. So probably wasn't anything as severe as a transverse lie. It was probably something like the baby was sunny side up, and the midwife it just takes a long time to get the baby out if that's the presentation. It's just a difficult birth, and it can take a long time.
Poor Jane.
She probably was really, really exhausted. She was probably really, really tired. And when you're really, really tired and you just don't have the energy, it takes a long time to push the baby out. It's not a good situation. And then they kicked the midwives out at some point and brought physicians in. Probably didn't know what the heck was going on, and they probably didn't contribute anything positive to that labor.
These women, they really went through it back then, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. Yeah. It's actually, though, the statistics that I found are really surprisingly good. In the Tudor times, in the 16th century, it's less than 2 women per 1,000 that died in childbed. So that's actually really good. If nobody broke your water early, because that would usually cause infection. If you had an intact sack of waters and nobody messed with you too much, the odds of you surviving childbirth was really quite good. Now, the babies died more like, I think it's 1 in 30. So okay. That's much, much higher. But that's because, poor hygiene and, illness and all kinds of things like that. But actually, maternal deaths were pretty low in the 16th century, all things considered.
Wow, that's kind of amazing because we think of it as being so much worse.
So much higher. I know. I was shocked when I found that. I was like, wow, that's really interesting. It became actually much, much higher in the 16th and 18th centuries when they brought in men, which they called accoucheurs, and they attended the birth, and it was crazy what they did to those women. First of all, they had this modesty thing that they would put on something so that they couldn't see the mother. So, and then they had these instruments that they would use that they would put inside these women that they had no idea, like sterile technique or anything like that. So they were causing all these infections, and the rate of maternal deaths just skyrocketed. And it got really, really bad when they moved women into maternity wards, because what you had then is you had the physicians who were dealing with with the mothers, and they were going from an autopsy to a birth. And they were killing women by the droves because of infection.
Wow.
That they didn't understand, germ theory.
Wow.
It really got bad. But in the 16th century, it was relatively safe.
You wouldn't think that. I feel like we've always heard that it wasn't, or all these women died, but it's not necessarily the case.
No.
Wow. I love having this conversation with you, but I definitely want to give you time to talk about your writing and your books. And,
Sure.
You told me at the beginning that it's fun to be able to write about this because you can kind of fill in the blanks where there aren't any answers, right?
I know, but you can't do that when you're writing a nonfiction book.
No, you can't. So tell us about your books and what inspired you to write them.
Okay, so book number 1, The Tudor Queen's Midwife, which I mentioned is about Catherine of Aragon. So that was the first book I wrote. And the impetus to write that book came from a question that I heard from somebody saying, okay, you think you know the Tudors, but do you know who Catherine of Aragon's midwife was? And I mean, I was like, wait a minute. I don't know who Catherine of Aragon's midwife was. I got to go look this up. So I tried to find out who her midwife was, and it's not recorded. So it got me thinking, and I read a lot, probably like you. I read voraciously. I always have. I've got like 5 books going at any one moment. And my husband has been saying to me for the longest time, you should write a book. You should write a book. You know a lot. You should write a book. And I just sort of laughed it off because, I mean, you don't just do that, right? You don't just sit down and write a book. And I've never really considered myself to be an author. It was something that I just never really thought of when I think of myself. And I got inspired one day to just try. So I sat down at my computer and I just started typing. And I said to myself, if this is no good, I can just delete it. I'll just write until I don't want to write anymore. And then I'll have someone read it and they can tell me if they think it's worth saving or not. So I wrote and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote. And a long story short, it took me about three months to write the whole book. Sorry, my dog is barking. And it just like came out of me like so fast and so effortlessly. It was just amazing. And so I took the book to a lot of people, friends and family, and just anyone who was willing to read it, I'd give them a copy, and everyone really liked it. And some people had some suggestions about what I could do to improve it, and I sent it out around to a bunch of literary agents, and I got some good feedback and I got some bad feedback, but nobody wanted to take it. So I decided to self-publish. So I self-published. And then it's interesting because once I self-published, then I got like a bunch of offers of people who wanted to be my agent. So I don't know what's going to happen. I've got the second book completely written, and the third one I'm about a quarter of the way through. So I don't know like who's going to publish those books, if I'm still going to do it myself, or if I'm going to have I don't know. I have a contract with Pen and Sword, so it says in my contract that they get first dibs on anything that I've written. So I have to submit it to them first. And if they want to publish it, then they'll publish it. But so who knows who's going to be the publisher in the next, the series. But it's been a lot of fun, and I enjoy it tremendously. And for me, writing fiction is just so great. I love imagining things and writing about the things that I imagine I smell, and things that the way they taste and look, and the fabrics, and the way the courtiers are dressed, and conversations that people are having. And it's just a lot of fun. I really love writing fiction, and the nonfiction I'm enjoying too. It's just a really completely different thing.
It is. I tried, I've been working on nonfiction for so many years now, And at one point, I was encouraged to write fiction first because I was always told fiction is so much easier to write. But I realized I do not have the right creative mindset to be a fiction writer. Like, you create these scenes, you paint this picture. That is not something that I can do. I'm like, here are the facts. I'll try and tell it in an interesting way.
Oh, that's great, though. That's a real gift. I mean, I wish that I was a better like nonfiction writer. Like, for me, that's just like really difficult, sitting down and just writing out the facts and just not making anything up. It's really hard.
That's how I feel about making things up. I'm like, yeah, but don't I need facts behind making it? And everybody's like, no. This is what fiction is. And I'm like, I can't.
It's so much fun because you have the history laid out for you, like as the template, but then you can you can take it in so many different directions. Yeah. And I just felt like the story of the Tudor dynasty being told through the eyes of a midwife is just like, I had to do it because nobody had done it before, and it just felt like it was a really unique way of telling the story.
Yeah, definitely a unique way, and it's so well written. And I think you had mentioned earlier, if anybody's interested in purchasing your work, they can do it through Amazon.
Yeah, they can go to Amazon. It's on Amazon. It's on Google Play Books. If you don't like, because not everyone has a Kindle, so you can get it on Kindle. You can get it in paperback form, and then you could also get it on Google Play. And then the nonfiction book will be published by Pen and Sword. I have a date of when I'm supposed to be finished, so that's in January. We'll see if I make that. I don't know. We'll see. But that'll be out by Pen and Sword. But it takes them a while. Once you submit the manuscript, then it takes a while before it's published. I think, like they said, like 18 months, maybe even before it's going to be coming out in hardback. And right now, the working title is what is the working title? The Mothers and Midwives of the Tudor Dynasty, I think, or dynastic. I don't remember exactly, but something along those lines. We may end up changing it. We'll see. But so that's basically the nonfiction book, and I talk a lot about what court protocols were for pregnancy, for the confinement period, and then the period after that, which is like when they had like all these ceremonies that they would do. They had the baptism, and then they had the churching, and there's like all these rituals that they had around childbirth that I go into great detail. So if you guys are interested in that, then you'll love the book. And if you don't like that sort of thing, then you won't like the book.
I can't wait for this book to come out because I think it's going to answer a lot of questions and fill in historical gaps that maybe people didn't know before. So yeah. I know we talked briefly on the subject today, and I'm sure there are questions that the listeners had that I forgot to answer. So if somebody is listening right now and they have questions for you, what's the best way for them?
Ask questions, you guys. Ask lots of questions.
How can they find you on social media?
So I have Twitter, which I never go to, the Tudor Midwife. I'm a little bit more on Instagram. Also, I'm the Tudor Midwife. I have a website, the Tudor Midwife. So you can visit me in any of those places, and I'm happy to talk to anybody who's interested in this topic. And I also breed and raise Cavalier King Charles Spaniels. This is Lilibet.
So cute. I just want to
she's named for the late queen.
Yeah.
And she's going to be a mommy in the fall. So we're going to have a litter of puppies. So I'll be posting pictures of the puppies on my website if you guys want to see what they turn out like. So I'm sure it'll be cool.
Yeah. And if you're just listening to this episode and not watching it, Lilibet is absolutely adorable. And I just want to reach through the camera and scratch her.
She's also really sweet. She's just like a little sweet girl.
Oh, well, Brigitte, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your knowledge with me.
Okay. We'll say goodbye now. This is Remington. Bye.
Bye, Remington. And that concludes another episode of the Tudors Dynasty podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you love the show and would like to show your support, consider becoming a patron over on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Tudors Dynasty. Over there, you'll get commercial-free episodes, early access, and some patron-exclusive content as well. If you would prefer to show your support in another way, head on over to my website, tudorsdynasty.com, and click on the shop to see some of the new merchandise that I have available. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.